Thank you for joining us on the Winning at Selling podcast. I'm Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems, and with me is Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute.
As the adage goes, leaders are readers, and Heraclitus once said, you can never step into the same river twice. My point is the market is ever changing and you don't have to create all the solutions yourself. Sometimes someone has already figured it out. If I still have your interest and curiosity, stay tuned as Bill and I welcome our guest, Mareo McCracken, as we discuss his book and other great ideas on episode 491 of the Winning at Selling podcast.
Who's this Heraclitus guy?
He's a very famous philosopher.
I watched his TV show.
Philosopher.
Yeah. I watched the Hercules TV
municipalities.
show.
I'm working on municipalities.
That's
from
right.
the last episode. And I finally got down jujitsu. For
There
those
you
of
go.
you that are playing along at home.
All right. And we are in the book club. Book is Sales Jiu-Jitsu. We're in part 2 of the fight, and this is, I think, chapter 4, connection.
Yeah.
So I'm not really crazy that they use the word fight in here, but it matches their analogy. So let's not get too wrapped up in what we call the time with the customer, but that's what it is. It's the client conversation. In this part of fighting, there's going to be 3 sections: connection, openings, and positioning. So today we're going to talk about connections, and that has 3 phases. So the first phase is connect on your terms. And so it's the initial engagement, and how we engage matters. It's all about establishing rapport, right, Scott? I know that you're big on that.
It is, yeah. And I think what triggered my memory when you said that is when we did the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's the win-win. It's not my way, it's not your way, it's a better way. And the connection is the foundation of a better way of working together towards a common outcome and with a mutual commitment.
And I think we're going to learn more about that because Mareo's book that we're going to talk about today is called Really Care for Them, about how you treat your customers. And so I think I'm very excited to see how he talks about that initial opening with customers as well. But in the last chapter, we talked about getting 5 pieces of key data in pre-fight, so that you can design an opening to relate to that person. It's doing that pre-approach that allows you to get the customer on your side and get working in conjunction with each other rather than in opposition to each other.
Yeah, good advice.
Daniel and Elliot contend that you're creating true rapport will increase your sales by 20 to 35%. That seemed kind of high.
Yeah, it does. It puts a lot of pressure on that particular step in the sales process, when I think discovery or qualifying or the interview, the investigation step is probably the one that has the greatest percentage.
Yeah. I think you have time to create that rapport. It doesn't have to happen in 30 seconds or less. Yeah,
I remember having Robert Jollis on the podcast, and he wrote the book Customer-Centered Selling and had a tremendous influence in the Xerox selling system. And he said, we kind of fell asleep with the process and skipping the bonding and building rapport. And I listened to his episode a couple of weeks ago, and he mentioned that again with the guest. So that's a system that's very well respected, but they forgot that step of building trust and building rapport. Because if we don't have that, we don't get honest answers. I mean, the investigation, the qualifying can all be good, but customers are always going to put themselves in the best light if we don't have that trust and rapport established in the beginning.
Well, that's right. We've talked about that in the past. Customers might tend to give us faulty information that covers up for them.
Right.
The second piece of this is go or no go. So if you haven't been able to create rapport with the other person, and that maybe they have an attitude or things don't seem to be heading off well, they advise you to stop and say, maybe we're not able to connect here.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that there's always a wonder with salespeople. Do I have trust and rapport yet? If you give them information and they ask you a question and you give them the response to the question, and then you ask them a question and you feel like you're getting it good, honest answers, and when they stop talking and they give you a statement and they don't ask you a question, and then you're silent because they didn't ask you anything, if they keep talking, you got it. You've got trust and rapport because they feel comfortable sharing information with you. If they stop talking and they don't share anything with you after a period of time, you need to follow up with another question and keep going because you haven't completed this step yet.
Yeah, I can remember an appointment I was in with a sales leader, and we had a challenging product that we were selling. And the prospect kind of copped an attitude on us and tell me more and get to the point. And he basically just closed up his book and said, you know what, I don't think this is right. And we walked out of there, and it kind of gave me a feeling, because I was young. I thought, man, that's a feeling of empowerment to know that I can walk out on something that doesn't feel right. And it's better to save your time and not have to mess around with somebody who's just really deciding they want to run everything in their own way. Maybe we can reschedule. Maybe it's, I think he suggests, maybe we're not getting along here very well. And sometimes that person will come back and go, you know what, I had a bad morning. So it's probably me.
Yeah. Good point.
So have you ever run into that where you've walked out?
I've been giving them the same content or the same attitude back. And, eventually it kind of gets old when we're both kind of sitting there and we're both feeling frustrated. And then some of us got to make a move and just go, you know what? I think I probably should move on, and you head out. But I find that sometimes people like to work with people that are like them. So if you start matching and mirroring and start reflecting it back to them, and they're looking at you like they're looking in a mirror, they know that you're picking up their vibe. They may or may not like it. And they may or may not, they may be testing you too. Right. I used to sell websites to attorneys, and they're just flat out bullies sometimes on the phone. And then when I give it back to them, they feel like they can rely on me and trust me because I'm not going to take their gruff, and I'm going to tell them how it is.
Right. So a third part of this he calls line in the sand. And that is, it's important to empower your sales reps to know the absolute point they can go to make a sale. Can we give a 5% discount? Can we give free delivery? What can we do to have a little bit of movement? What's that maximum negotiated price, discount, freebie, whatever it is that you want to call it? That'll allow me to close the deal. If they want more than that, it's a no-go. And it's not, I got to ask my boss. That this is as far as our company goes. And I know you've talked in the past about salespeople not having that kind of power, because then they're going to use that as the only way to close the deal.
Right. Yeah. And when you start cutting the price, you're going to always have to cut the price. So when you cut the price, you turn your product into a commodity. And that's not, as Anthony Iannarino says, coming in from the right. You got to be that trusted advisor and come in from level 4, coming in from the right, where you're not selling just a service or a product, or you're focused on business results. You're that trusted advisor, and that's value.
Yeah. I think the biggest problem with most organizations is that they pay commissions based solely on total sales. So because the salesperson has no stake in what profitability is, if they give them that power, then they'll tend to use that to get the quick deal.
Yeah.
So
very good point.
It's something you have to be careful of. But I do like his point in this about, I'm not going to turn you over to the closer. I'm not going to go ask my boss. Either I can make this deal and move it forward, or I can't. And I think your salespeople have to know what they can do to get the deal done. And I think it's, it's a fine line, and it depends on the product. Some products, you want to close them right away. Some products, you're going to be going back and forth until you have that trust built up. So some products that I know people sell, if they don't get it the first time, the customer talks to someone else, they're going to get closed by somebody else. So
yeah, good advice.
There are more difficult and less deliberative sales processes out there. So
yeah.
So those are the 3 pieces in this, in the openings and connection. Connect on your terms. So make sure you have those 5 pieces of information. Go or no go. If it doesn't feel right, don't waste another hour trying to make it feel right. Challenge them a little bit and see if they're going to come back to you and say, you know what, let's start over. And then draw that line in the sand. Empower your people to know the absolute point they can go to make a sale. Yeah.
Good point.
So we want to remind everybody, we're giving the book Sales Jiu-Jitsu away. We're giving away 2 copies a week. Elliot and Daniel were kind enough to give us some books to give away. And so if you want to get in on the drawing, go to winningatselling.com, ask a question, say hello, ask to be put in the book drawing. Our winners this week are Vince Lunetta. He's a longtime listener, and Jose Suarez, who's also a longtime listener. Both of them we met on LinkedIn. So that's another way you can get hold of us, and we'll put your name in the drawing if you connect with us on LinkedIn and let us know that you're a listener to the Winning at Selling podcast. This segment has been brought to you by the Professional Sales Association Accelerate 2022, their half-day selling workshop. Learn more at www.psamn.org, psamn.org. Start the new year with Accelerate 2022, a great half-day selling seminar hosted by PSA, the Professional Sales Association. The keynote speakers are Daniel Moskowitz and Elliot Bayev, authors of the international bestseller, Sales Jiu-Jitsu, the Secret Black Belt System for Champion Leaders. They will be presenting 4 black belt strategies to double your conversion rate. Also presenting will be social media expert Jennifer Radke, who will present Expanded Social Media Equals More Customers. Accelerate 2022 will be held from 8 a.m. to noon on Friday, January 7th at the Doubletree in Bloomington, Minnesota. Admission is $99 and includes breakfast. Also, the first 30 people to buy tickets will get a copy of the book Sales Jiu-Jitsu. So get your tickets now. Learn more at psamn.org. That's psamn.org.
That's going to be a great event, Bill. I'm really looking forward to it. So
yeah, and if any of our listeners want to meet Scott and I, we're both going to be there. So
absolutely.
I'll be emceeing the event. Scott will be there. He's a past president of that organization as well. Yeah. So we will be there, and it's starting to fill up. So
really grateful to have Mareo McCracken on with us. He wrote the book, Really Care for Them. And we get a lot of invites for I'm just talking to our listeners here. We get a lot of invites for people that want to be on the show. And I'm not exaggerating when I say I probably get 2 or 3 a day. And they're a little light in content, should I say. And all of the guests that we've had on the show, Bill and I have personally reached out and invited them to be on the show. And it's the reason that I believe we have the loyal followers is because we don't just accept all of the invites from all the people that want to be on the show. We only go out and recruit the people that want to be on the show. Mareo is a little bit different. He reached out to me personally. I called him. He picked up the phone, answered the phone. We had a delightful conversation. I really found that what his content that he wanted to share with us was relevant for our listeners, and I invited him to be on the show. He mailed me a copy of his book, impressed with the book, impressed with the people that he has quoted, that he is associated with. Like I mentioned it earlier, Anthony Iannarino, he's associated with him. Victor Antonio, we've had him on the show. He knows him. And the content of this book is really a great reminder of what salespeople need to know when they're dealing with adversity every single day. So Mareo, great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. Anything that you would like to share about yourself before we get started?
Hey, Scott. Hey, Bill. Yeah, I'm very excited to be on your podcast. It's a great tool and a great resource for so many of us in the sales profession, us daily practitioners who have to sell every day. And it's just a great honor to be here. So thank you.
Thanks for being on. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've highlighted a few of the chapters that you wrote about. But one of the questions that I ask everybody that comes on the show, the number one question is, what sales book has had the greatest impact or influence on your selling results?
It probably wasn't a sales book. It was a book called Leadership and Self-Deception. Written by the Arbinger Institute. It's a pretty kind of famous leadership book.
Yeah.
Not the most famous. It's not a John Maxwell book, but it's a pretty well-known book, right?
Yeah, I've read it. I have it. It's a great book. And you're right. Not that common. Highly recommend that book.
Say the book name again for people who missed it, like me.
Leadership and Self-Deception.
All right, great.
I asked Anthony Iannarino the question, what book had the greatest impact on him? And he said Spin Selling. And he shared that book is still in hardcover. I think it was printed in 1973, and it has not converted to soft cover. It is still one of the greatest books when it comes to sales. So another great book, Spin Selling.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think Spin Selling, at least from my opinion, was the first book to define how to be a consultative salesperson. At least that's from my research and from the books I've read. It was the first one to codify consultative selling.
Sure. Larry Wilson was also known for that, the counselor selling method, which was a different approach than some of the other past ones. Another question that I like to ask is, what person has had the greatest influence on your sales career?
Oh, as far as one single person, probably my wife, of course,
Oh,
but that's in
okay.
my whole life in general. But as
Sure.
far as like in my sales career directly, it probably is Victor Antonio. In my
Okay.
first job out of university, he was one of my sales mentors at the company I was working for.
Okay.
And he was the reason I realized, well, I could maybe make sales a real thing for the rest of my life, not just a stopgap as what it was when I started.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Good.
Yeah, it's
Good.
amazing the number of people that get into sales because they don't have anything else to do, and they either make it or they find it to be just fascinating, or they go and go back into psychology or whatever they studied. But
the
what was
history
it?
degree that I think is
Yeah,
very
get that
valuable.
history degree. So what was it, Mario, about selling that made you say this is something I want to do forever? I don't want to just make it a stopgap.
So I was initially going to go to law school, but then my family needed a little more income at the time. So I said, I'm just going to go get into sales first and then go to law school. But then I realized I can really, really help people get everything they want and need if I learn to master the art of selling. And so the more I helped people, the more I fell in love with it. And the more I learned the strategies and the ideas and the concepts behind it, it just made more sense that I can help people and then earn as much as I want to while helping people. And it didn't feel like in other professions that I was considering that would always be the case. And so that's really what did it for me in that sense.
I don't think enough people see selling as helping, do they?
Yeah, not usually. That's why nobody probably thinks of it as their first career choice. Well, not very many people think of it as their first career choice.
We're starting to see colleges that have a sales degree now in their business schools, and that's good. We've had a speaker for one of the organizations that Scott and I share. So some of the universities here are starting to do that, and I think that's good.
Yeah. When once you start treating it like a profession and a craft, it makes a lot more sense and it opens a lot more doors.
At what age did you start selling?
Full time when I was 23.
Okay. Yeah. I was 21. I mean, it definitely had a big impact on my career after that, just playing that role for a while.
Yeah. I started doing my own door-to-door, right? Selling my own lawn mowing services when I was 11. And then I was a missionary in Hong Kong for 2 years. So I was selling Hope for 2 years, right?
Wow.
What years were you in Hong Kong?
All of 2002 and all of 2003.
Okay. My wife actually went to high school in Hong Kong.
Oh, really?
Yeah, her dad opened China for Caterpillar Tractor as a salesman.
Oh, wow.
So she was incredible. There in 72, 73, 74, that kind of time frame. So
Hong
cool.
Kong was a great place back then, from what I hear.
Yeah, it was exciting. So, well, I really liked the book. When I got it, I started reading it, and I thought, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I buy that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so I really enjoyed the points. I love quotes. Scott and I do a quote. As a matter of fact, we're going to ask you for your favorite quote here near the end of the show. So put your thinking cap on for that. But the book seemed to be more organized as I got into it, more organized, like a thought for the day sort of thing than kind of a coordinated process. Why'd you decide to present it in that way?
So there's a couple of reasons, but the main reason is most salespeople that I talk to that are sales professionals that do this every day don't read sales books. At least over half of the sales professionals I talk to don't read sales books. They might listen to podcasts, which is super good. They might watch videos on YouTube. They might take some training courses, but they're not necessarily reading books. And when I talk to people and I dive into it, they say, they're just too much information and they're boring usually. And I just don't have time to read it from chapter to chapter. And so I decided when I was going to put a book together, it wasn't going to be something that was something you had to focus on and spend a lot of time reading. It was something that would be high impact, high hitting right from the beginning. And if you didn't read it in order, it wouldn't cause you to miss half the content.
One of the challenges, and Scott and I have faced this challenge in training all the time, is that we don't do things with the ideas that we see are good, right? And that's what I like about this approach that you've taken is I should read that early in the morning, like a devotional almost, and then say, okay, what am I going to do with that idea today? How can I start to interject that idea into my daily routine or change my routine to be better?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's a good point.
So I've highlighted some of the pages, and I'd just kind of like to get a little bit more background on this particular point. But the first one is on page 17, chapter 9, established good habits. And I really believe that this is the foundation of salespeople being proactive with their time, is to create a routine or a habit and know what you want to accomplish every day. Because if you don't have a goal or a desired outcome, any outcome will do. And so many salespeople, I'll interview them and I'll ask, tell me about a perfect week. And they'll say, well, it really depends on what happens. I said, don't tell me don't give me what happened. Tell me what's going to happen. I don't want a weather report or a stock report, on what happened. Tell me what's going to happen and make it happen that week. So talk a little bit about some of the habits that you think are important with salespeople.
Yeah. The whole premise is that motivation is really hard. Discipline is difficult and habits are easy. So if you can develop habits, then your life becomes so much easier. And so some of the habits that salespeople need to have are the habit of asking the right questions, right? And lots of times we get into pitch mode. And so everybody knows you should ask questions, discovery, interview, those type of things. But is it actually a habit, or is it something that you still have to take discipline to focus and do it the right way? Because once it's a habit, then you don't need discipline anymore either, because it's a habit. And so asking the right questions is something that is a habit that we need to develop. And lots of times we don't think of what we do in that sense as a habit. We think of habits like brushing our teeth and getting out of bed, but making sure we ask questions before we try to sell anything needs to be a habit that all salespeople develop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so true. The and since you're talking about habits and questions, on page 60, you talk about questions create conversations, conversations build relationships, relationships develop opportunities, and opportunities lead to sales, by Phil M. Jones. I don't know the background of that person. What's the fame
so
there?
He wrote a book that's a global phenomenon, actually, called Exactly What to Say.
Oh.
And it's been translated, I think, into like 40 languages now. It's incredible, his book. And initially, I think he self-published it, and then it's gotten picked up, and now he's having follow-up, and he created a book just for Audible. He's doing really, really well. And it's just a sales book that says, hey, when this situation happens, you say this. When this situation happens, say this. And so it's called Exactly What to Say. But the whole point is, if you can build enough trust with someone, then that eventually will lead to sales. And just questions are a good way to show expertise while showing you care about the other person at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Out of all the tips, I mean, there's so much in this book. It's so full. What do you think are a couple of the most important ones that spring to mind for you, as if we don't do these from a sales standpoint, we're just not going to get the results that we want?
Well, I think there's kind of two answers to that. One is the tactical stuff, and maybe it's on page 70, chapter 32, the 10 rules for better sales experiences. That's more the tactical side. But before you get into that, on page 20, when it talks about the outward mindset, that's actually the self-deception part of leadership. And self-deception is to get out of deceiving yourself. You need to have an outward mindset, meaning instead of just thinking about yourself and what you want, start thinking about other people and what they want and need. And if you can develop that, instead of an inward mindset where you're being selfish, where you're thinking about others, that sets the foundation for everything else you do, because your mindset determines your actions. And so if your mindset is outward, then your actions are going to be outward, and people can feel it. But then those sales experiences that are talked about are if you take responsibility, right? If you listen more than you talk, if you follow up when you're supposed to, if you get people to keep commitments, and you don't talk bad about other people. Those are the kind of things that, as long as you do those things, the other things you're doing also will fall into place.
Well, good advice.
Excellent. Yeah.
The mindset and the conceptual beliefs, I think, are so important that salespeople have. I mean, you just talk about some of the ones that hold salespeople back, like it's not polite to talk about money and don't talk to strangers. I mean, those are two beliefs that paralyze salespeople, and
they're
like, it's so true. And
I think one of the things that's causing the most trouble in our world is be careful. Is all of our children are told, you said, don't talk to strangers. Be careful out there. Just be careful. And because our parents got paranoid about, or as parents, my generation got paranoid about kids getting kidnapped or whatever. And so now the kids, as young adults, they're afraid of other people.
Right. Yeah.
Crazy.
Very impressionable. I mean, that's such a common belief and activity for parents. Some of the characteristics of salespeople, I think, are really important. And on page 74, you talk a little bit about the top characteristics of salespeople. And I think achievement oriented, number one, is the main goal for salespeople. If you're not focused on achievement and outcome and achieving the goal, then I'm not sure what is more important than that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That's why it's number one, because you have to want to get something accomplished. You have to want to get things done. And that's partly for yourself, but also for the other person you're serving. And that's where that outward mindset also comes back to play, is if you can achieve for someone else, you're on your way to being exceptional in sales.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So explain, I know you have the word humility in that group. And I would think that a lot of people would look at salespeople and say, they're not humble. And so how do you justify humility versus the confidence that we need to make the phone calls and take the no's?
Yeah, and humility and confidence are super, super awesome when combined together. The difference is when you add in arrogance, and arrogance is when you think you're better than other people. And so you're not willing to learn or grow, but that's what humble is. You can be extremely confident in your abilities, but you're still willing to learn and grow. And so I think of the top professional athletes like Tom Brady. Tom Brady is probably one of the most confident people in the world, but at the same time, he still studies film every day, all the time, so he can be a better football player. And it's the same in sales. We can be extremely confident in our abilities, but that doesn't mean tomorrow we're not going to go read another book, we'll listen to another podcast to figure out how can we be better. And that's where that humility comes in, is, are you willing to learn and grow no matter how good you are?
Yeah, it's so true. I think, there's arrogance, and then there's also ignorance. I think arrogance is, I know everything I need to know, and ignorance is what I don't know doesn't matter. And there can be a real balance between the two. And there are flat out some salespeople that are ignorant because they go, what I don't know doesn't matter. And those are the ones that don't read sales books and don't listen to podcasts. And they're not interested in betterment as a lifestyle for their entire career. And you open it up by saying, salespeople don't read books. So true. It's one of my first interview questions every time I interview a salesperson is, tell me the authors and the books that you've read that have had the greatest impact on your sales behavior, your sales career. Just like I asked you, Mario, when we first started. And they're like, well, there was that red book that I read. God, I can't remember the author.
I took a class 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Now I know everything.
Like, wow, I can tell you really internalized that content. So let's just kind of erase that, because that's not going to be playing it forward at all. But
well, let me break in on that, because there's just so much information out there now, podcasts and videos and books and all sorts of things. What are some of the resources, Mara, that you use to keep yourself sharp? So how do you choose them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So nowadays I choose to read books based off of the topic I need to learn about and discover about, right? And so it used to be, when I first started my sales career, I was just trying to read anything and anything. And so whatever was most popular, that's what I would study. And I think that's a good foundation if you need to do it that way. Just whatever was the top selling book, I'd say, okay, if it's that top selling, I'm going to go figure out how to, what they're saying, right? Or the most popular recommendations. But now, most of the time when I'm either doing a training or trying to solve a certain problem for a client, there's a specific problem I'm trying to solve. So I'll try to find out who is the expert in solving this exact problem, whether or not they're popular or famous. And then I'll go study those resources based on the exact problem I'm trying to solve.
Okay. Anything that you'd use kind of as an ongoing resource?
Well, I still, even though he was my first sales mentor back in 2006, Victor Antonio, I still try to watch as many of his videos on YouTube as I possibly can.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So on page 154, you talked about my favorite word and what I want to be known for, and that's commitment. That's my chapter 1 in my book is on commitment. And
I've always told Scotty ought to be committed. But
yeah, I know. And I learned commitment just because I had this disease called short timer syndrome with different companies that I worked at. And I always thought that the grass was greener on the other side. And then I found out the problem was me. And every time I went to a new job or a new company, I brought the problem with me. And it was my lack of commitment and dealing with adversity. And you talked a little bit about the importance of adversity and resilience when we start talking about the characteristics of a salesperson. Number 4 is resilient, and commitment. And your byline here is the fastest way to achieve your dreams is to commit to them. And I think salespeople love to stick into the comfort zone, and the comfort zone is where dreams go to die. Yeah. And that's exactly it. So how did you learn commitment?
Oh, shoot. There were so many ways I learned it, but I think initially it was from my mom growing up, where commitment is sometimes forced upon you when you have no other option, right? Either you're committed to sinking or swimming, right? And so my mom, single mom, raised 6 kids. She just had to figure it out. So she was committed to making it work, and she did. So that's like that first step of commitment. And then if you're on a sports team in high school, you either commit to doing everything the coach says, or you commit to bulking, and then you get benched. So you either commit to playing or not playing. And so there's lots of ways to learn commitment. And in sales, especially, either you're committed to helping your client no matter what it takes, or you're just committed to working 9 to 5, or you're just committed to try to catch your base check and not worry about your commissions. Right. So whatever you're committed to, you're going to do. But in my mind, the Viking story of burning the boats is what kind of the example of commitment. When there's no other option, then that's a commitment. When you get married, you commit to that one person, meaning all other options of people are off the table. So once you commit to something, there's no other option. And so that's what a commitment to me means. You commit to that result and nothing else will do.
Oh, I love that. Burn the ships.
Amazing.
I just love that story. I read about it first in Think and Grow Rich, I think is when I first heard that analogy.
Yeah,
probably
that's a
me
great
too.
story.
Yeah, that's probably where I read it too.
Yeah, it's been told to about 3 different people.
Yeah,
like Cortez,
exactly.
I think, and the Vikings. But it is a great story.
I thought it was Magellan, Ortiz, I think is what, yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's great. And so we need to wrap things up here, Mario. Any final thoughts that you have that you want to leave with our listeners?
Yeah, just if you really, really care about other people, your actions prove it. And so lots of people say intent matters, which is kind of true. It does, but your actions always prove where your heart is. And so your customers will be able to feel that.
Excellent.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's so true.
And thus the name of your book, right?
Yep, exactly.
Obviously I can get it on Amazon. Any other links you want us to put in the other ways for people to contact you?
Amazon's probably like going to be your best deal, but Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, all the normal places where you can buy books, it'll be there. But most people just do Amazon, right?
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll put a link to your book in the show notes. So if you go to winningatselling.com and we're on episode 491, that's where the show notes will be.
Excellent. Well, Mario, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm going to ask one more favor of you. I mentioned it earlier. We do a golden nugget, a quote, and obviously you are a quote monster, just reading through your book. So what's one of your favorite quotes that we can leave our group with?
Yeah. So my favorite quote recently and right now is from the company I work with and part of the main technical founder. His name's Bo Malosnik. And he always says, apathy is the enemy. So our competition isn't our enemy. People internally who are against us at target accounts are not our enemy. Our enemy is ourselves when we don't care enough. Yeah. And so if we have apathy, then that's what kills us. It's not anything anybody on the outside does to us. And so if we fight the right enemy, we can usually win. But often we're fighting the wrong enemy. But apathy is the enemy. And that's my favorite quote right now.
Excellent. Wow. Yeah, it creeps up on us, doesn't it, too?
Yeah.
We take an extra half hour here or there. We don't put our heart into something, and then all of a sudden we're more apathetic than we thought.
Yeah. Wow. Great quote. So again, everything is at winningatselling.com. Go there to enter our book giveaway, Sales Jiu-Jitsu by Elliot Bayev and Daniel Moshkowitz. 2 books every week we give out. So fill out the form. Tell us what you like about the podcast, what we can do different, guests that you think we should bring on, ask us a question. We'd love to hear from you.
And our book club again for next week, Sales Jiu-Jitsu, Part 2, Fighting, Chapter 5, Openings. And our topic for next week is staying motivated. Go out and get better, one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.